to a business, right? What type of insurance should people be looking for?
Well, that's a good question. All of those actually, it all fits. It's the same thing, right? It's like there's more involved from a business perspective because welcome everyone. Thank you for joining. This is my name is Cecil Lawson. I'm the owner of C&H Insurance out of Rock Hill, Connecticut, and co-host of C&V Productions.
I'm Victor Moran, co-host of CMV Productions Presents. And today we present the learning session where we talk about past interviews and what we've learned, questions, comments that Cecil and I may have so that we can learn from our guests and from ourselves. And today we're going to touch on the interview that we had with Sincere Delgado, where he talked about some of the struggles and challenges of scaling a business and scaling a business quickly. What was one of those challenges, Cecil?
Yeah, so in talking to Sincere, which was a great interview, by the way, just wanted to do a
Yep.
shout out to him and for coming on again and talking with us. Um, since I'm in the insurance business, he had a during the conversation he had mentioned that no mentioned it was important to know the business and the importance of that and all the things that came with that, whether it be contracts, insurance, licensing, things of that sort that are all involved with the growing a business. And we all know that there's some people that are really good at what they do, but may not be very good at the business part of it. So we're going to take a section of that, of that conversation and really talk about what I know, and that's going to be insurance. So we can hopefully help someone out there understand, the basics of what it is and why it's important to have it and what you have to consider before you even start the business, right? Because a lot of people don't know that even if you're thinking about starting a business, you have an address, you have a tax ID, you can get a quote to get an understanding of what the numbers are going to look like even before you actually put the business in place.
Yeah. And Cecil, what type of, when people hear insurance, people think of health insurance, they think of kind of like car insurance. But when
Yeah.
it comes to a business, right, what type of insurance should people be looking for?
Well, that's a good question. All of those actually, it all fits. It's the same thing, right? It's like there's more involved from a business perspective because, with your auto insurance for your home and your auto, you're thinking about these two properties that you have, these two pieces, these two assets. So your auto, you get into a car accident, and then you think about the car accident. How can that affect your home? So you have to, put those two together. In the business, from a business perspective, you have to kind of think of it the same way, but it goes beyond just a home. Now may you have a building or you may be renting, but you do have inventory, you have tools, you have employees, you have payroll, you have receipts payable receipts that you may have that could be lost through hacking and things like that. So these are sort of things you have to consider, just like you would look at your home and your auto, you have to kind of look at your business and say, okay, wait, what is the main thing here that I need coverage for? Right. And, that comes into really thinking on your own, but you can think all day. You may not know what actual insurance is available. So it's always best to talk to a professional, someone that's in the industry and understand what types of insurance are going to be needed for the type of business that you have. Does that make
Yeah, and
sense?
it does, it does, and as someone who has experience in starting a business and not knowing what questions to ask when it comes to insurance, I can tell
Yeah.
you for sure, like, yeah, there's so many different things to consider. Even now, as someone who spent many years in technology, now more in cyber, you realize like, oh wow, there, it's more than just, for example, getting insurance for your property. It's like you think physical assets, but there's
Right.
digital assets as well.
That's
And
right.
a
Yeah.
lot of people overlook cybersecurity insurance, for example.
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, most people are dealing with the digital assets. So whether it's like you said, it could be intellectual property, it could be customer information, customer data. You
Yep.
have to protect that and protect yourself. And it really comes down to managing risk, right? It's
Yep.
like, how do you manage the risk? Because you're always going to be exposed no matter what business you're in, right? And you just have
Right.
to understand what that exposure is, so that and to your point, it's don't be scared to ask for help or ask a professional, right?
Yeah.
Because there's going to be things you're not going to know.
Yeah.
I mean, to your point, so when customers are coming to you, what do you find as far as like the lack of knowledge? What is it that people aren't asking themselves when they're starting a business, or even when they're
Oh,
scaling, right? Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. People, a lot of people that come to me, well, I won't say a lot, but some people come to me thinking that they already know what they need, right? And they may have an idea because, they've heard it, or, it's being requested by the company that they have a contract with, that they're trying to do business. So they basically come to me and say, oh, this company says that I need, say, general liability policy in order to do business with them, right? So
Yep.
yeah, you can write, but what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
Right? What they don't understand in that from that perspective is that the general liability is being put in place really to protect the people that are telling you to get the general liability policy, right? Right. So they want to make sure that you have a certain level of insurance in case you do something and you are found liable, that will also protect them, right?
Right.
So,
Mhm.
now you have to think of it from your perspective as a business owner. Well, how do I protect what I have? Right. Now, having a general liability policy, I'll even take it a step back. Think of liability, right? The word liability. It's basically identifying if something that you are responsible for, you are liable for, right? So in that sense, you are protecting whoever you caused a problem to, right? So if they try to sue you, that coverage is there to protect them, to get them back on their feet, and to allow you not to have to worry about the additional expense. Because if you don't have the money and you're sued, and you have a business and you got to come out of pocket for a lawsuit, even for defense of a lawsuit, that
Mhm.
can cripple the business, right?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
you want to make sure you have this in place. So in case something does happen, someone trips and falls at the business. So from a property standpoint, things get damaged. There's a fire, you have liability for the place that you rented, things of that sort. Or maybe you infringed on someone's idea, right? So you need that coverage to protect you, right? And that's where the liability comes in. But then there's your own personal assets that you have to protect, right? And that comes into your property, like
Mhm.
your inventory that you may have from a business perspective, your tools that you may be using to do business, the building that you may be in, right? These are all the things that you have to look at and say, well, okay, I have the liability protection for someone else, but now how do I protect myself? So business owners may come in and say, okay, this is what this company is requesting that I have, but they have no clue on what that's actually doing.
Right. Right.
So, it's important to talk to someone, not only so you can get the proper insurance that is being requested, but you also know why you're getting it. One,
Mhm.
what it protects from your perspective, right? And how will it help your business if something actually did happen?
Right. Are there any scenarios that you would say would justify not getting insurance?
From a business perspective,
Yeah.
for a business, not really. No.
Yeah.
There's I would say I would recommend, if you're doing business, especially if you're dealing with customers, right? And if you're doing business, I don't know many businesses that are successful in not dealing with customers. You should have some form of insurance in place, and from a liability standpoint, at a bare minimum, right?
Mhm.
So, because if you do something wrong, people are going to come after you. And depending on the type of job that you're doing, that liability changes, because you may
Yeah.
need professional liability versus
Yeah.
just general liability policy. Uh,
So, it just dawned on me. I'm thinking of those individuals that, let's say, they haven't filed they haven't established a business, meaning they haven't formed an LLC or
right.
whatever, right? They haven't formed a corporation. And
Yep.
they're like, hey, I'm just kind of doing this as a side hustle. right? What
Right.
exposure do those people have, right? Because you're saying, hey, I'm doing this and hopefully it'll grow into a business, but I haven't taken that next step to say, yes, I'm not filing for LLC. I'm not going for incorporation. I'm not doing any of that just yet, but I am technically providing a service or whatever, right? Providing a product. I believe there's exposure there, but help educate the people. Like what's the exposure? What should you be doing?
Yeah, well, the exposure is there because if you don't have an LLC in place, it's just, I'm not an attorney, so I just want to make sure that's clear.
Yeah.
So, but definitely if you're forming an organization, thinking about it, speak with an attorney so they can tell you the proper way to form your organization. But if you're just doing it as a sole proprietor, just from my own knowledge, you're doing it. So you're responsible, right? So that means any assets you have aren't protected, right? Now you can get insurance as a sole proprietor, but if you choose not to and something happens and someone tries to sue you, then guess what? They're coming after your assets. So that could be your home. That could be your 401k, your retirement plan. You know, these are the things that they can come after if you cause some really major damage, or you may have done something that you were responsible for in the role that you're in, and you did it totally wrong, you know,
Yeah.
and now they're coming after you to say, okay, I need compensation for this. Or God forbid, you had someone's information and that information got out,
Yeah.
right? It got hacked. Now you have no defense at all. And you probably have to get your own systems up. So they're coming after you personally. And now you have to try to rectify the problem, all out of pocket expense. So yeah, it's for individuals that are starting out on their own. I mean, even for a little side business that you're doing, I mean, you have to be reasonable. Some people, and I try to be very reasonable on this. Some people starting a business, you're not making any money. You're not doing anything. In that case, you can't afford insurance because you don't have clients, right? So if you don't have clients, so be it. But the second that you do,
Right.
that's where your liability comes in, right?
Yeah.
Because you can cause a problem, and people tend to hire lawyers and sue. That's the way it is in the United States.
Right, right. So, one of the things I can think about is you mentioned physical assets. I can already see some people saying, well, if I have, let's just say 100 or $10,000 worth of equipment, whatever that equipment, whether it's
Mm,
cameras, computers, whatever, and it goes up in flames, I'll
yeah,
just replace it. Why do I need to get insurance for that? Right. It's
yeah,
like, so what would you tell someone, who says, nah, I can just replace, it's only 10,000 bucks. I can replace it.
yeah. Well, why?
Mhm.
That would be my question. Why would you want to take $10,000 out of your pocket to replace it? Because, if you're just insuring $10,000 worth of equipment, you actually can add that onto your policy for a couple $100. So why? Is it just to say that you can? It's like, listen, if you're cool and you got the $10,000, you can just pop out of your pocket in a second and you can go do it and it makes you feel good. Okay. But if you're going to be an intelligent business owner, the reality is that you don't want to have that expense. If something did happen that was unexpected, like there was a fire and all your equipment did go up in flame, you want to make sure that you call the insurance company, you have a list of all your items, and you say, okay, these are the things I have. They cut you a check and you go out and get your equipment. That seems like a much more easier process than me having to go into my bank and I have $90,000 in it now and I got to pay out 10,000. Now I got $80,000 and I'm looking like, damn, I'm redoing this all over again.
Yeah.
I mean, if it makes you feel good to say that you have the $10,000, and I know from an ego standpoint that can happen, people
Yeah.
can say, yeah, I've got the money. Why should I do it? It's like
Yeah.
from an
I think, a
intelligent
lot of
business
people,
standpoint, do it.
yeah, yeah, no, it's interesting because when I talk to, or I even heard this recently, which, yeah, I'm sure it'll make you cringe, but, I heard someone say something along the lines like, why do I need life insurance? Like once I get it, I'm targeting myself for death. And I'm like, what are you
What?
talking about?
Yeah, yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
people don't know people, or at least I think that the misconception is people think like, well, it's only a few $100s, or it's only a few $1,000s, but not realizing like, no, 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 no. I mean, yes, it's a low probability that something may happen to the equipment, but in the chance that it does, right, you can quickly, like you said, you can quickly recover from that happening to you. And that
Yeah.
again, that goes into managing risk. I think people forget that. It's like, you're looking at the dollars, but you're not really assessing the risk, right? Like,
Risk.
what's
Yeah.
the impact if this actually happens, right?
Right.
It's
Yeah.
like if, and it's like, no, you have to take all that into consideration. Same thing with like life insurance. It's like we're all gonna. I'm sorry to tell you, but we're all gonna die at some point.
Yep. Hmm.
Um, and freak accidents happen, and all you're trying to do is manage that risk because if something does happen, you're protecting your family, right?
That's right.
You're protecting your business when you're doing that with the assets. It's like you just have to think. You have to think bigger, longer term, and not just think of like, oh, it's only $10,000 or whatever it may be.
Oh, yeah. Well, a lot of what I find is that, you know, every a lot of business owners want to be covered correctly, right?
Mhm.
But it may not be cost effective for them to do it, right? They might need coverage for their business. They may have a thought in their mind of what the cost is actually going to be, and that might be totally off, right? So some people have said, I got this contract that required me to do insurance, and then they get the quote and they realize that it's a few $100, right?
Yep.
And they hadn't been doing it for years, right? And it's like, well, for those amount of years, you could have been protected, right? It's just that simple. And that would have opened you up to more job opportunities. So, you know, it's really, I tell people it's better to talk to someone, get the numbers so you can understand. Just like when we were talking with Sincere, there's things that you have to consider in being a business owner.
Right.
You may know what you're doing, your trade, your skill set is perfect, but when you create a company, you are looking to make a profit and you're in business. So
Mhm.
in doing that, you have to think, if the business goes down, how will I be impacted? How will the business be impacted? How will this affect my family? Right. So it's much larger than just, oh, I'm got a little business that I'm doing on the side
Yep.
and, I can make a couple extra dollars here. The reality is okay, what if something goes wrong?
Yeah. I
Right.
think most people because I at one point I was thinking this way too. I think most people think the probability is low, and so I'm not going to worry about it without really assessing the impact when the impact is really high.
Yeah.
And like I think people underestimate like when
The
that impact
impact.
is high.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Hmm.
impact is like when you take the two, you then start to realize, well, maybe it's not. Maybe that extra $10 a month or $100 a month
It's
is
worth
worth
it.
it, right? Because it's like no. Your impact is way too high. The risk may be low, the probability of it happening may be low, but if it does happen, that impact is astronomical. And it's like, then at that point, you're like, what are we talking about, dude? A few hundred, $10, 20
Yeah.
bucks, $30, whatever, right?
Yeah. Well, it goes even a little bit further than that because I've had situations where I've had property owners state that, if my building goes down tomorrow, I just leave it, to be honest. If it went down, burned down to the ground. So the coverage limits. So when they look at the coverage limits, they think, oh, I don't need certain coverages because if it burned down to the ground, I would just leave it in and walk away. But my question is what if it doesn't burn down to the ground,
Right.
right? Well, what if you got a 10-unit property and 2 units are burned or
Mm,
three,
yeah.
right? And you still have a functional building that you have to repair, but
Right.
your coverages aren't replacing at with excuse me, with no depreciation. Sorry, my
Mhm.
brain's going on. Right. So you're considering depreciation now at this point for everything that's damaged in that property.
Yeah.
Right. So now your cost is going to go up just because you wanted to save a couple dollars. And now it's not like, okay, I could just walk away from the building. The building's still functional. I've got people in it. Now to repair it, I have more out of pocket costs. Right. And these are sort of the things that you have to consider. Now, for some people, like I say, they have the finances available to say, yeah, I can do that. And that's fine. And I'll save in the long run on the insurance. You know, if you want to do that, that's fine. You're doing it from a business perspective. If you think that's more suitable for you, that's fine. I mean, I personally think that it makes sense to have the proper coverage in place on your assets to make
Yeah.
sure if something does happen, When it happens, then you can be reimbursed and get back on your feet and get out the door without any additional cost to you
Well,
other than what you paid for the premium.
yeah, and that's the other piece too. So the overhead cost
Yeah.
again, people forget about that, right? So educate people on like so something happens like you said that so that building right catches fire, only a portion of it goes down. So what is it? They submit a claim, and then what happens then? Like what happens with the insurance company? So people understand like
Yeah,
there
so
isn't.
it goes through it goes through a process. I mean, we'll stay on a course with the building, but
Mhm.
I'll also use another example. But from a building perspective, it's very simple. You put in a claim, something happens, adjuster comes out, takes a look, looks at the cost, says, okay, these are the things that were damaged, writes you a check as to what they think the cost is going to be. It might not be what you want in the beginning, and if it's
Mhm.
not, you can test it and say, listen, no, we've got this, this, and this. This needs to be covered. This is what the cost is going to be. I've got it out all laid out. I got a contractor came in, told me this is what the price is going to be. You submit that, and they'll probably look at it and say, okay, if you got a contractor, boom, there you go. Here's a check. Get it replaced. Get it
Mhm.
fixed. Get back on your feet. Now, what people don't understand, need to understand about insurance, it's not there to make you better than you were before you came in. It's literally there to get you back to where you were prior to the accident or to the occurrence, right? So, um, that process can, depending on your communication with the adjuster, can be easy or hard. Then you have a broker as well. If like we can communicate directly with the adjuster to make sure that the communication between the client and the adjuster are there, because we've had situations where they might not be communicating well and they contact us. We get in the middle, bring the parties together and make sure the information gets back and forth and things get done. Right. So now there's other situations like, let's say, well, we talked about a building, but let's say we were talking about like an auto accident from a standpoint,
Yeah.
right? So it's sort of the same thing. Adjuster comes out and they'll look at the process. They'll say, okay, this is the damage that was caused. Now, someone that got injured is saying, okay, we also want to sue you now
Mhm.
because we think you're liable on that front too. Now, the insurance company will defend you at no additional cost, right? Without the insurance, you're defending yourself, right? So the defense cost alone is worth getting the coverage from a liability standpoint because a lot of people have been in car accidents, right? And if you've ever been deposed, had to go out and give a statement about the accident, what the lawyers are looking at from the insurance standpoint is they're looking at you and saying, is this guy believable if we actually went to court,
Mm.
right? Will we have to pay out the whole amount? And if they look at it and they look at the recordings and they talk to you and they say, yeah, they would give them the money. They're going to give you the money, right? That's how it's going to be. And again, I'm not an attorney. I'm just talking based on
Yeah.
my experience of going through that process, right? From a
Right.
car accident standpoint. So, you know, not having the necessary coverages can really hamper you a lot because there's the added features of defense costs that are covered, the professional adjuster that comes out, takes a look, and getting you, being able to cut you a check relatively quickly to get things going again versus you having to go find the money to try to get things back up. So there's a lot of things that have to be considered um, when you're starting a business, and insurance is one of the key pieces of it. And then
Yeah.
it's about protecting assets, right? And it's a lot of things that people don't consider from an asset standpoint.
Yeah.
If you have a business that is generating income that you depend on, what happens when the business can no longer function, whether it be an accident or lawsuit? If you don't have the funds to really protect yourself against that, now that impacts your personal life. So if you're
Right.
using money, if you're paying yourself on a business to pay your mortgage, now the business isn't making money. Now that impacts your mortgage, that impacts your family, right?
Yeah.
So these are the sorts of things that you have to consider. It's not just, oh, I'm protecting the business. No, you're protecting your livelihood.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so for those, most business owners are tied up. And for all the people that we've interviewed, we hear the same thing, right? they're touching different aspects of the business. So worried about marketing, they're worried about sales,
Yep.
having to learn accounting. Oh, I have to learn legalese because I got to talk to my lawyer. So they have a lot of things on their plate. You get your policy, right, for insurance, and obviously it's like a manual. You read it. It's a massive document. You read through
Right.
it. I'm pretty sure most business owners are reading when they get it. They're reading it from beginning to end, right? Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure. Yeah. Everybody's
but
reading it from beginning
yes,
to end, of course.
as the business grows, right? I think people like what do you recommend for business owners? Like what should they be thinking about? What should they be asking themselves? Because yes, when you're growing, right, you're growing, you're focusing on so many things, but the reality is that the insurance you started out with is
Yeah.
probably not the same that you need now, right? The requirements are different. Like so,
Always. Yeah.
what is your recommendation for those business owners? Is that something that they should be doing like monthly, annually? Like what should they be doing to be in that kind of mode to always say, hey, you know what? I should probably maybe not me, someone look at the policy to make sure I'm covered. That we now
Yeah.
that we've grown.
Yeah. From a business owner should be, if any change in the business like new employees, new materials, new inventory, new tools, even new contracts to an extent, you want to make sure that you interact with your broker or your insurance agent to tell them about the differences that are coming on and just basically see, do we have to make changes to the policy? Right. Right. If you're making, because most policies, there's going to be an audit every year to 2 years. Right. So that'll sort of tell you where you're at as far as how much money you're coming in, because those are the questions that the insurance company is going to ask. So if you want to be proactive, you really want to say, okay, I know I hired new people last year, we or last month. Let's talk. Let's make sure that that the coverage is in there on the workers' comp. It's also covered from the general liability standpoint. Make sure that we don't have any risk that we're not seeing. So having those conversations is always important. You can try to schedule something every year to review if your business is changing, but definitely if something happens major, like let's say you bought a new building, right? If you bought a new building, definitely talk to your agent, right? If you're, and a lot of businesses do this. They may be doing, let's say you're an electrician, and then you're doing well in being an electrician, and then you open up a new type of business. It may be close to being an electrician, so maybe you're doing consulting instead of being an electrician, and they think that that can fall under the business. It
Mm.
can't. They're two different businesses,
Yeah, yeah.
right? You're an electrician versus a consultant. The insurance company is covering two different things right there. And no, the insurance policies don't do that, right? So if you're doing a different type of business, right, you need to have different type of coverage for that type of business, right? And a lot of businesses think that they can, start off making this type of product, and then make another type of product that's totally different. And oh yeah, we can just encompass that under the current policy. And if something happens, then they realize they don't get a claim. This is a totally different product, totally different company. We can't, the insurance company is not going to cover it. So
Yeah. Is
yeah.
there anything that you have found that business owners don't know that they can insure?
Well, there are a lot of specialized insurance companies out there. So I mean, we've all heard the stories about actors and actresses and singers insuring their voice or their legs. So depending on what company you're dealing with, yeah, there's probably a company out there that will insure it, right? It's just a matter of the risk that's associated with it, whether they're willing to, take on that risk, and if they think it's something that is, likely to happen or less likely to happen, right? So, um, there really isn't. I mean, I haven't. No one's ever called me and said and tried to say, "Listen, I'm a singer. Can you insure my voice?"
Right.
That's never happened, but I've heard of it happening, right? Um, I would be interested to, I mean, I've got carriers that could do it, but so I would be kind of interested to see if somebody actually did want to do it, to give it a shot, but there's a lot of options out there from insurance, but there are things that maybe not, certain carriers, like all carriers have the type of business that they want to write. right? So some may think, oh, I do garbage delivery or something, and then I can get insurance from anywhere.
Yeah.
Probably not. You're going to have specific people that are doing that waste disposal business. And those are the companies that you have to go to, because those are the companies that want that type of business. Where other carriers are like, that's not our market. We think there's too much risk. We don't want to be associated with it. And they will just say, no, I'm sorry, that's not something that we do. Right. And
Right.
a lot of business owners, if they try to do a lot of things themselves, they can run into a lot of problems with that. Like they think they can go online, and I can find a carrier that'll write what I need. Yeah. And you might, and then realize that you don't have the proper insurance, or
Mm.
two, your classification of your business is totally opposite of what you needed because you didn't really know what to look for. And
Right.
no
Right.
fault of their own. They just try to do it the easy way. But insurance, especially on the commercial side, is not easy, because once you start putting like umbrella policies, GL policies, cyber policies, the coverages have to match up, because there might be something in the umbrella that the GL doesn't cover from an exclusion standpoint, and then one could offset the other. So, these are sorts of things that a novice is not going to think about, not going to know about.
Yeah.
So
But
it's always best to
actually,
talk to a professional.
yeah, no, so that actually brings up another question for me. So so when a business owner is coming to you and they have different needs for, again, I can't think of a good example right now, but a business that needs coverage for physical assets, digital assets, employees, whatever. They have a bunch of things. You're basically taking like I guess what you're doing is you're trying to find the right carrier for each specific piece of it, or you're saying, hey, I find one carrier that can
Yeah,
cover you
yeah. We
overarching.
want to, it kind of depends,
Mm,
right? Because it depends on what they're asking for. So, like, if they're asking for like an auto, they're asking for a cyber, you can actually do that with separate carriers, right?
mm,
These are sort of things you can do with separate carriers. You would want to try to put everything together, but there may be carriers that say, for this type of business, we're only going to do the general liability, right?
got it.
And then there's this another carrier that may say, we're only going to do the cyber. That's what we do. We like cyber. We're willing to do cyber for this business. The other company doesn't offer cyber. We'll do it. Right. And then you have to piecemeal. The ideal situation would be to have everything under one umbrella, where you can put everything together. One company, you deal with one company. But that's not always the case. Sometimes you have to, look for the best opportunities for your client to make sure that they have the proper coverage that they need, and present them with that, and let them, walk them through everything so they can make an informed decision and decide what they want to do.
Good, good. Is there anything we haven't covered that you wanted to talk about?
I mean, in general, from general standpoint, from a business perspective, if you're a business owner, don't be afraid from the insurance standpoint, don't be afraid of the insurance piece, right? If you're thinking about starting a business, and you got an LLC, or you're doing a sole proprietor, or you're doing an S corp, whatever it may be, and you want to know what numbers look like, talk to a professional, get some numbers around it. It doesn't cost you anything, and they'll be happy to do it. And even if it's a month or two out, even if it's a year out, and you're just really putting it together numbers to try to get an understanding of, submitting for some financing, a year out, definitely those numbers will change. Even 3 months out, those numbers will likely change. But at least it will give you an understanding of kind of what the numbers look like, so you're not so afraid of it down the road. And you would know what coverage you actually need. So I would always recommend, get that part of it out of the way as soon as you possibly can. Typically, the price is not as outstanding as you think it's going to be. And work with a professional like myself that can help you and walk you through exactly what you're going to need to know.
All right.
All right. I hope
Sounds
that
good.
helped, guys.
Yeah.
And thanks again for watching. And we look forward to having you on future, have you watch future episodes. Please subscribe, and leave any comments to help us get better at this. Thanks again,
Yes,
guys.
please do. All right. Thanks.